you look at these initial court cases, you look at what's going on, it's easy, if you believe the mainstream media, to get, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen, this is so terrible. Steel up. This is a tough fight. It's going to be a fast fight because December 14th is going to be upon us, and there's going to be some massive decisions people have to make. The one thing, the reason the show is so important is that this is the platform for the voice of the deplorables. And that's why it's become so powerful and so important. It's not about us. It's about you. So it's time to do a gut check, right? Because it's going to get pretty nasty over the next couple of weeks. And, you just have to be steeled for it. So, and we will continue to provide you 24 hours a day with news and analysis that you can use. Okay, we're now going to go to, it all gets back to the finesse, right? How did when you went to bed at, those of you who didn't stand up to see the president's, much delayed speech, the one that should have happened at 10:45 at night, that happened at 2:30 in the morning. The president was winning by a landslide. We've said this for months. I went around the country on the plot to steal 2020 with Raheem Kassam and told them exactly how they were going to do it. We were going to have a massive victory with real votes, legal votes, chain of custody votes on November 3rd. And they were going to come in with a wave of these mail-in ballots, and they were going to overturn it. What caught them by surprise was the massive turnout of Trump voters. They then had to get sloppy, right, to get this done because it was such an overwhelming victory. And all they're hectoring you on, where's the evidence? Where's this? Where's that? Where's evidence is being, nothing could be clearer than what's going on in Wisconsin. Now, a judge at a level said, hey, he's not throwing things out based upon what they have today, but how they gamed the system by changing the rules and basically creating illegal votes on a massive scale is epitomized by what's going on in Wisconsin right now. But there's other areas, and clearly in Michigan and in Pennsylvania. So we're now going to bring in from Zurich, Switzerland, and Vincent. He's got a website up. He's not comfortable, and we're not comfortable putting out his last name right now. But he's got a nom de guerre. Actually, Vincent is his actual first name, from Zurich.
Vincent for Victory.
Yeah, Vincent for Victory. He's a data scientist. I'm going to turn it over. He's got a fascinating story of how he got engaged in this. And he's got a fascinating story of what he is finding. And we're going to put up the data sets as we go through this. We're going to put the data sets up so you can begin to see it. And we're going to be putting this out so that people can check it. I want to turn it over to the one and only Jack Maxey and bring in Vincent from Switzerland.
This is Jack here, and I want to just say before I start talking to Vincent, we always talk about human agency and action and how history often turns on the behavior of a single individual or a small group of individuals who come together. Vincent is one of these guys. He was watching the election on the election night. He went to bed thinking that this thing was all locked up, and he woke up the next morning and he witnessed the finesse. And he started to ask some questions, and he really started at a very basic level. He said, can we compare the voter rolls with people who have died? Can we look at who's voted and who has had an obituary in their name? And so he went and he started going through voter files, and he found some amazing things. And Vincent, what I want you to do is talk to us, start out slowly, tell us how you came to this and how you started and where we are now, because I think people are going to be shocked to find out that, for example, in Pennsylvania District 45, they started checking all of the people over 80 on the voter rolls, and they've gone through about 19,000 at this point, and they have found hundreds and hundreds of people just in that District 45 of Pennsylvania who are deceased and voted. And they checked these things several different ways. They checked against ancestry, tributes, find a grave, obituaries, and then the voter rolls. So this wasn't just like a one-off. They were very thorough in their attempt to get the data. So Vincent, I'm going to let you roll, brother.
Yes, thank you. I started out just checking the voter rolls, if I can find any kind of examples, because I was just curious. And after I found a few examples, I posted online, and I got together with other people. And I found some really brilliant people that were also wanting to look into it. And together we aggregated data sets, and we went through them to check for dead people, to check if they have voted. And I found really brilliant people to work with me on this. What we did was, as you said, we checked people from the voter rolls. We first checked for people in a certain age, just because to make the search a little bit easier. Because when we query the databases, it takes time, since we can only do a certain request a second. And so we checked an age bracket, and we checked for people that were voter status active. So they were active voters. And of those people, we checked the obituaries, and we found lots of dead people. And we also checked that with other data, the ballot tracking system, to see that they have received ballots and that the ballots were sent in. So that was
so. Now, when you
beginning.
You guys first started looking at this, you were just looking at open data, and you told me you started reaching out to people because of your findings, saying, hey, you guys should take a look at this. You reached out to some GOP people, and you ultimately ended up being connected to some GOP people in Pennsylvania out in the West. Doug Ball, I guess you spoke to him, and they gave you some data sets that allowed you to look a little bit more deeply into this. And so in Washington County, and we're running the scroll on the screen, people can see this. This is one data set for the whole county, I think, is 80 pages, and the other one for just the district is about 55 pages. But there are 3 or 4 people on every single one of those pages that you see scrolling who are in the ground and also in a voting booth.
Yes, so it started like this. The very first data set was actually we're starting doing queries, and we found people that had been registered for Republican, but their party one status, basically the last status change, was a D, and we found about 40,000 people that were changed from Republican to Democrat. I then started cold calling people from that list, and the reaction was quite strong, quite violent. People told me to fix it or to change it. People thought I was calling from the government. I explained to them that I was just checking and just doing this research. So that was my first attempt to contact people. Then I contacted people from the GOP themselves, because the media was not responding at all. And I contacted people from the GOP. I found to contact some really nice people from the GOP that were very interested into looking into this, and helped us a little bit, and we helped them back with data, basically. So this list that you see here is, I think, from the 45th district, and there's also the Washington one. What's interested is that there are also pictures of the grave, and there's death notices, and we also have the records, like you can check on the ballot tracking if they have a vote and when it was recorded.
So Vincent, this stuff is kind of explosive, because if it's happening in District 45 in Pennsylvania, if it's happening in Washington County in Pennsylvania, these are not exactly hot spots of voter aggression around the country. I think the fear for many people is, if you can come up with a couple hundred dead people in these counties,
but how was this actually? How did this actually flow into what happened in those districts? Greg? What's the status of those districts today? Hang on. What were they on election night? What are they today? And what did this data have to do with the difference?
So the 45th district, and specifically is the state senate district, and it's a virtual tie right now. And one of the reasons why it's a tie is we had that ruling in Western Pennsylvania, how people that didn't date their absentee ballots or mail-in ballots correctly got tossed, and that was about 2,300 ballots. So that's the status on the legal front of this state senate district that is in a virtual tie right now.
By the way, if that was taken throughout the whole state, particularly in Philadelphia, and we had the ability to not have the separation, the mingling of the ballots, Donald J. Trump would be the winner in Pennsylvania. That's what that's the level of detail we're talking about. This is the problem we have in Pennsylvania.
And
Is that correct?
extrapolate that out to there's a total of 67 counties, so there's 66 more where this can be facilitated.
This is the finesse. Okay, I want to go back now. How did the finding of this affect the 45th district?
Well, from my understanding, and I want you to explain it to us, Vincent. You said you gave all this.
I tell you what. Why don't we let Vincent cogitate on this? We're going to take a commercial break, and we're going to come back. We've got segments, and we got other people to come up, but I want to get to the bottom of this. This is explosive, and this shows you about people going to the numbers and going in and getting into the data and comparing and contrasting, and it can be extrapolated out. So that's why I want to take our time and make sure we get
And
this.
there's another interesting set of data that he has where he
Yes.
compares people with the same first, middle, and last name and the same birth date and the voter rolls in Pennsylvania and Michigan, and there are tens of thousands of similarities.
Let's take a short commercial break. This is War Room Pandemic. We've got Vincent on from Zurich, Switzerland, one of the data scientists going through the details of the voter rolls. This one in Pennsylvania. We're going to return in just a moment. In the next hour, we've got Boris Epstein's coming on from the campaign, going to walk us through the entire battle map. We're going to try to actually go to Atlanta, Georgia. We got Maggie Vandenberg down there, and also from Real America's Voice, Ben Qualcomm is down there. Ben Quam. Okay, good. We're going to come back in a second.
Now you don't have to. If you don't have it, you better get it.
The revolutionary, all-new MicroTouch Type
and daily cleaning. Immune system's to us so fast.
This is War Room Pandemic. We are now, we've gone from South Carolina and Georgia. Now we're going to go back to Zurich, Switzerland. Vincent, who's a data scientist, who's been going through the details of the data sets in Pennsylvania to look at anomalies. Jack, I want to turn it back over to you. Why don't you walk through what Vincent has found in these data sets?
Well, Vincent first was looking just as a curious person, and let's be clear, he did not have any specific role in this. He's just a global citizen who saw a grift occurring, and he wanted to know how it occurred. So Vincent went in and he started looking and he started digging, and then he started finding things, and he contacted people in the GOP and some media personalities, and nobody was really paying attention until he got out to Western Pennsylvania and he got a hold of Doug Ball, and then he got some specific data sets for Washington, PA, and for District 45, which allowed him to actually go back and compare against the official voter rolls, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is the only real complete data set for a specific region that you have. Am I correct? But
so this is so this is a complete data set, but we did use the government servers to query to ask about the ballot status, so the ballot tracking. So we still have, that's still official data, but that's data that we had to get from the servers, basically. So yes, we have a contact in the GOP, and we just got asked to look into certain things. We did look into certain things, and we got a reply that was very nice and very helpful, and did indeed help very much in that particular part. This is just from the that part of side. There are also other things that I definitely would like to mention, which are very important, if I may.
Yes, please do.
So we found dead voters. We found people voting across multiple states. That number, we compared voter rolls by, we defined a unique user by a first name, middle name, surname, date of birth, and we found different matches. And taking into account that they're all voter status active. They're all active voters, which means they get ballots, and they have been voting quite recently. We found double voters, people within a state that have the same first name, middle name, surname, date of birth, and different voter IDs. Lots of them with the same address, some of them with other addresses.
Let me step in just for a second.
No, hang on a second. And I just want to make sure we're going to put all this so the posse out there can double check this. We're going to put it all out so people can check this. But continue on. You're saying you found across state lines, you found same names, same exact names, same date of birth?
Yeah. Yes, middle name, first name, last name, date of birth. And we found multiple entries in different states with voter status active, which means they're active voters that get ballots and that you have to vote recently. They have like a system. But we found that across multiple states. Now, in the example of Michigan and Pennsylvania, we found over 160,000 people. We actually found our first batch was 700,000 people that matched that criteria, but we narrowed it down to say, okay, maybe it's a different person, or maybe it's junior, maybe so we narrowed it down from 700,000 to 160,000 to be more precise. So that's the multi-state voters, and that's just 2 states. So we really think that across multiple states, you can just think how many people are voting across multiple states. Then the next step is potentially switched voters. So voters that have been switched to D, but were R, that I called, and they had quite violent reactions. That's the other thing. And then we also found PO boxes and addresses. So we found PO boxes with hundreds and even thousands of voters, and we found addresses with hundreds or some thousands of voters. Now, some of those PO boxes belong to faculties, like universities, and we looked into them. The faculties in Pennsylvania have a voter turnout of over 100%. So, for instance, the Lincoln University has more votes on that PO box than enrolled students, and that's by a big chunk. So we also think it's a multi-layered problem that we're really looking at. So PO boxes, or we found users like phone numbers with hundreds of different people belonging to them. So that's another problem. Then another thing that we found, which this is actually how we think the scheme works, and I think this is very important that people hear this. The scheme, from our opinion, is like this. They order a ballot, a mail-in ballot, for themselves, but that belongs to a different name, to an address that they can access. Then that address is being stored in the database as a change. Then, because it is stored in the database, they order a second ballot, an unsolicited ballot, to the correct address of that real voter. That address gets overwritten as the last change. But in fact, there are 2 ballots sent out. First, for the fraudster, second, for the real person. Then the real person either votes with mail-in ballot or at the poll or provisional, whatever way. They still have the ballot that they sent to that address. They fill it out. They wait until the voter has voted. And in the last second, they dump that ballot in and overwrite and negate that vote. How did we come to this theory? We found discrepancies in addresses of people of where it was mailed to and where the person actually lives. And we also checked loads of addresses against Zillow and other websites, and we found lots of voting addresses or addresses that where the ballot was sent to that were still in the system, are for sale, are owned by a bank or.
Vincent, we're gonna take a short commercial break. We'd like you to hang on. It won't be for the next segment, but we'll slip you back in here. Okay. Vincent from Zurich, Switzerland, who's been doing with data scientists there, have been doing a detailed analysis of the state of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Actually has worked on a couple of, I would say, flipping a couple of these districts. We're going to take a short commercial break here. We're going to go business. Nobody's bigger than CNN, and it just so happens that their headquarters is in Atlanta, Georgia. Brandon Strzok and the Walkaway team are particularly incensed with how CNN has basically covered the reality of this election. Remember, these are former Democrats, a very diverse crowd, but they're real patriots. They have now come to be huge supporters of not just President Trump, but a Trumpism, the entire program of President Trump. They had a big rally here following the rally last Saturday, in Washington, D.C., made up of these former Democrats that are now fire-breathing populists, fire-breathing economic nationalists. And now they're in Atlanta today. They're staging a protest at the headquarters of CNN even as we speak. It's just kicking off now. They were not able to get a permit, my understanding is, and so they're somehow congregated on the sidewalks outside of CNN. We're going to go to Ben Berquam as soon as we can to get a live report. Also, our own Fog City Midge is somewhere down there, and we're going to try to, you got to keep an eye on Fog City, or she'll wander on you. So we're going to get to Fog City Midge also. I want to go back to Pennsylvania for a second, in particular this explosive report from the data scientists. One thing people should understand is that this is a crowdsourced operation. Not just these guys, but many guys. There's so many people that are walking to the fire on this. And beneath the surface, there is tremendous amount of analytical work going on about Wisconsin. There's a tremendous amount of analytical work going on about Michigan. There's this and others in Pennsylvania. There's tremendous amount of analytical work going on in Georgia. There's a tremendous amount of analytical work going on in Nevada. There's a tremendous amount of analytical work going on in, guess where? The state of Arizona. And there's analytical work going on in even New Mexico. Now, people say, well, hey, let's just get focused on one. We're absolutely of the strongest belief of that. This is a fight on many different fronts, and you saw that you've got three different avenues of this fight. And we try to deconstruct this so that you can kind of keep it all together in each of these states. And that is, you've got a recount audit situation, whether that's going on in Wisconsin right now, it's going on in Michigan right now, it's about to restart in Georgia. You've also got the legal remedies, and you've got Rudy Giuliani with their own the campaign's own lawsuits that are going on in different. And remember, you're losing at lower levels to push it forward to get to higher levels. You've also got individual lawsuits all over the place, and one of the ones we had on Phil Klein. We can't get Phil back on today. We'll get him on Monday. Phil Klein was on yesterday from the St. Thomas More Society's Amistad Project. They filed, and I think it all got filed by last night, 6 different lawsuits in 6 states, right? And they argue very specifics, the granularity in each one of the lawsuits. So you're seeing across the board that this fight is continuing on. Resources are pouring in. People are getting very focused on what they need to show as evidence as far as the analytics go and how that ties to affidavits, etc. So people out there in the audience should understand that this is a fight. What you're seeing on the surface is one level of it, but below the surface there's an ongoing and tremendous fight. I'm going to come back to Greg and to Jack, and we'll talk this through. We got Boris Epstein at the bottom of the hour to walk through the entire battle map, but I want to go live now to Real America's Voices, the one, the only Ben Berquam, who's been doing such an amazing job of reporting. He was at the rally last week. Ben, can you give us a situation report of what's happening in Atlanta today?
We are at the CNN headquarters, Steve. We've got hundreds of people down here right now. I'll kind of turn the camera here. You can see this event was being put on by Brandon Strzok, and they're going to go from this location down to the Capitol. And it's right now it's an attack against the fake news media, against the censorship, against all of what we're dealing with in this country, pushing fake narratives, pushing the undermining of this country. When we go down to the Capitol, it's going to be to restore, to stop the steal, to restore the vote, to not confirm a vote that they believe to be fraudulent, that so many Americans believe to be fraudulent, to stop this process and to allow only the real votes, the legal votes, to be counted.
So this is the walkaway movement, right? They are particularly incensed, given that they're former Democrats and former progressives that have now come to the Trump movement. What do they think particularly about how CNN has covered them?
Well, if you hear Brandon's story in particular, it's a story of being lied to. That's the problem with the fake news media. When we say fake news media, and I'm one of those people. I started doing what I am doing now because I was sick of being lied to. I saw so many stories coming out of places like CNN and MSNBC and the Huffington Post and New York Times and all of these leftist outlets. And I would go out and I would go to the places where they said these things were happening, and I would see for myself, wait, that's not what's actually happening. And so the people from the walkaway movement, so many of them, Shamika Michelle, who's speaking right now, Brandon Strock, who just spoke, and so many others, it's basically the message is stop lying to us. We need real news outlets like Real America's Voice to tell the truth. And that's what they're looking for. They just want to be told the truth of what's happening. And in particular right now, when you see a press conference with Rudy Giuliani, and all they can talk about is sweating hair dye and not the content of his words. I mean, it's so clear the fix is in for most of the media outlets out there, and that's the bottom line. They compare most of the walkaway, the lies that you get from the media, having made them think that they are Democrats, having made them think that they are victims, and finally waking up to the fact that they're not victims, that they're strong, that they're Americans, and that America's the greatest country in the history of the world, and Republicans aren't these evil things that the media has been saying for so long that they are.
So, Ben, you've been on the ground in Maricopa County. They're explosive out there today. They're fighting with the state legislature and what happened in Maricopa. You were at Washington last week at this really inflection point for the Trump movement. You're now down in Georgia on a day where a Republican Secretary of State certifies the vote and then goes on CNN, walks into that very building they're in right now, I think, and starts just basically pounding the Trump movement and pounding President Trump personally. What's the mood down there for what's happening in Georgia? What's happening with this recount? What's happening with the audit? What's happening with the sham recount, whatever you want to call it? What's the attitude of the citizens of Georgia, and particularly the Trump supporters, on what's going on?
Total disdain. Total, utter disdain. When you see Republicans bending to the will of CNN and the mainstream media and saying, oh, because we have to meet this deadline, we're going to certify a vote that clearly anybody with a reasonable mind that thinks rationally can see all of these votes that are popping out of nowhere in this recount. Clearly, this vote should not be certified, but we have to do it, this overcommitment bias, that we have to do this because the law says we have to do this. There is just as much disdain in this crowd for so-called Republicans, and that's why they love President Trump so much. President Trump, these aren't all Republican voters out here. These are President Trump supporters. These are patriots. These are populists who love this country and are just as sick of, if not more sick of, rhino weak Republicans who have lied to them just like CNN has for so long and told them what they wanted to hear and done nothing to actually fix it. When you see Republicans bending over and saying President Trump should give up, I'll tell you what, Trump supporters, you go to the top of their list for people that they despise.
Okay, you've got three things happening. We had Linwood on to start the show. You get three things happening, and Georgia is kind of one of the ground zeros of this. So you got three things happening. You've got the certification process by the governor, which he kind of gave some wiggle room yesterday about another audit by the Trump campaign that they can request an audit / recount. And it's all about are the ballots still there that you can tie back to the actual votes themselves, the ballots with the votes to the envelopes. You've got, and to check the signatures, you've got all the legal cases. I believe Boris Epstein is going to tell us, I think the Trump campaign's going to file today or tomorrow in federal court their suit to go along with Lynn Woods, who's totally separate, representing Georgia citizens, and he's going after the secret consent order that nobody knew about. And then you got the state legislatures, which now we understand there are a number of heroes and patriots down there in the Georgia Senate, in the Georgia House, are saying this is outrageous and we will never let this go forward as currently constituted. What's your sense, Ben, of all that coming together? I mean, December 14th is a date it's immovable. It's basically quasi hardwired into the Constitution through statutory, a statutory law. It can't be moved. 14 December is game day. How does all this get resolved on those multiple fronts down in Georgia?
Well, that's the thing. The timeline, obviously, we have a limited amount of time and a lot of work to do. But when you hear Sidney Powell and you hear Mayor Giuliani come out and say they have the evidence, they just need to present it. That really is what it comes down to. Do they have an opportunity to present it to the courts, to a reasonable court, not an activist judge like we see so many states across the country? And can this evidence move through the process in time to make the difference that needs to be made? Like you said, here in Georgia, they don't just need to reshuffle the deck chairs or recount the same cards. It's a matter of verifying the signatures and throwing out ballots where the signatures don't match. That's a huge part of it. And in the other states, it's throwing out ballots that fall into, whether it's Pennsylvania, ballots that weren't allowed to be observed by Republican observers, and whether it's Michigan, ballots that showed up in the dead of night, hundreds of thousands of ballots that they believe to be fraudulent. Can they get it done in time? And if not, then the Constitution kicks in and we see something that we've never seen before in this country. And I think ultimately this will, on many levels, get to the Supreme Court. And it will, I don't know if it will be decided by the Supreme Court, but I have no doubt that it will ultimately end up there.
Ben, hang on for 1 second. We'll do a package we just got from you on Brandon Strzok's speech outside the headquarters of CNN. We're going to go. Let's play that, and I'm going to go back to Ben in Atlanta.
I have a little bit of compassion for Don Lemon. Hear me out. Hear me out. I have a little bit of compassion for Don Lemon because I truly believe he doesn't understand at all what's going on. I don't even think he's invited to the meetings at CNN. Like when everyone sits down and they have their strategy planning meetings and they say, okay, how are we going to present the news today? Well, we got to figure out, how to make Trump Hitler today. We got to figure out how to make his following all white supremacists. We've got to figure out how to turn every story, spin every story into this. And I don't think that they invite him. So I think that he just sits down every day in front of the teleprompter and starts scrolling and he just sees Nazis, white supremacists, Hitler, whatever. And then he starts crying. And he's just like, the white supremacy. And I feel kind of bad for him because I don't think he's smart enough to get what's going on. I don't think he gets it. Like Rachel Maddow actually is in on it. Anderson Cooper's actually in on it. I don't think Don Lemon's in on it. He's not smart enough. He's too stupid.
Wow, let's go back to Ben Bergquam. That's throwing down on brother Don Lemon. I'm not so sure. I think I'd actually disagree. I think Don Lemon's in on it because I think Don Lemon's smart enough. He's part of the hate Trump camp. Ben, we got about 30 seconds. Tell us, leave us with the atmosphere. How intense is it there?
Well, I agree with you. I think Don Lemon is in on it. I think Brandon was using some humor there. The left can't stand humor. They can't stand being called out. And so I think that was really more what he's saying. And that's really what this is all about. When you talk about tolerance, when you talk about justice, when you talk about all these foundational elements of what makes America America, it is not the left that protects those. It's the left that destroys those. And it is up to us, the American people, to stand up and restore this country. And that is what President Trump has done for the last 4 years. And that's why so many people are out here standing up on his behalf. He stood for us. Now it's time for America to stand for him.
Ben Bergquam of Real America's Voice, the field reporter, doing a great job from Maricopa County to Atlanta, Georgia. We're going to take a short commercial break. Be back with the posse in a moment.